David Pastrnak will be going up against Jeremy Swayman in the All-Star festivities, as both players were picked by separate teams in the All-Star Draft. We're going to talk about how to improve the All-Star festivities and what might be next in terms of international play here on a brand new episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans? Happy Friday and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Beat. Today is Friday, February 2nd. I have seen my shadow, and there are many weeks left in the NHL regular season as we look ahead to the playoffs. First, we are paused for the All-Star break, where David Pastrnak and Jeremy Swayman will be participating for their respective teams. We'll talk about who picked them and why here coming up, as well as how to improve the All-Star game and the return of best-on-best international play, where Pasta might have to sit out for one mini tournament before the big one. First, I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now, my apologies to those who sat through the NHL All-Star Draft last night. It was, how should we say this? Pretty boring. I liked it a lot better when they did the draft in a more closed environment and allowed the players to loosen up a bit by way of some libations. As it turns out, it was only Michael Bublé who was on substances, as he revealed after that he had taken mushrooms prior to the event. I'm sure the NHL loved hearing that. Justin Bieber was in the house, Tate McRae, Will Arnett, as well as Bublé, but the star of the night in my eyes was Freya Pastrnak, the daughter of Bruins superstar David Pastrnak, who was with him during his media availability, sat there the whole 5 minutes with her big blue eyes, making some cooing noises, laughing, smiling, and she stole the show. What a debut for Freya on the big stage. Now, this came after the All-Star Draft, in which both Pastrnak and Jeremy Swayman were selected by NHL superstar captains. As it turns out, it was David Pastrnak being selected by a couple of Edmonton Oilers. He's going to play on Team McDavid along with Leon Draisaitl. They selected David Pastrnak partly because of a relationship that Draisaitl and Pasta have. Draisaitl said after the event, they kind of grew up together. They got drafted in the same year. They've been through the whole thing together. They trained back in 2019 together in Prague, spent some time together, and Draisaitl is excited to spend some time with him once again. And they really got to know each other during that 2019 training session in Prague. Pastrnak was rocking this beautiful yellow suit. And let's be honest, David Pastrnak, I don't think the NHL has done a good enough job of making him a face of the league. This is one of the most engaging personalities in the NHL. He always shows up. He always dresses up. He always has interesting things to say. Freya was there again. Did a pretty good job for her first interview, he said, grabbing the mic the whole time. She seems to love the attention, perhaps gets that from her father. And I really think the NHL needs to do a better job of marketing our boy David Pastrnak. And I'm going to talk about later on how they're failing to do so next year at least. So Pastrnak will be on Team McDavid with the pair of Oilers. Connor Hellebuck will be in net, as well as Sergei Bobrovsky. Other players on the team include Rasmus Dahlin, Robert Thomas, Sam Reinhart, Boone Jenner, Nick Suzuki, and Thomas Hertl. Selfishly, as a Guelph Storm fan, a Nick Suzuki fan, I would love to see Suzuki and Pastrnak get a little time together here. And the celebrity coach for this team is one of my favorites, Will Arnett. Hopefully they can get the job done. But they will be going up against some heady competition. Team McKinnon with Cale Makar joining him as a co-captain. They'll have Jeremy Swayman staring down Pastrnak and company. And he'll be joined by Sidney Crosby. Alexander Georgiev will be his counterpart in net. Kirill Kaprizov, Sebastian Aho, Tom Wilson, Travis Konechny, Elias Lindholm, now of the Vancouver Canucks, and Oliver Bjorkstrand. That celebrity coach for that one is Tate McRae, and should have a dynamic young roster in that one, just looking to make its mark. Now the other teams highlighted by Justin Bieber and his Maple Leaf buddies, Austin Matthews, Morgan Riley, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, teaming up, joined by Jake Ottinger, Clayton Keller, Matt Barzal, Philip Forsberg, Alex DeBrincat, and Vincent Trocheck. And then the final team is Michael Bublé's group. Team Hughes, Quinn Hughes, Jack Hughes, unfortunately, the latter not able to play due to injury, but they have Elias Pettersson, Nikita Kucherov, who was the first overall pick in the draft process, Thatcher Demko, Kyle Connor, Brady Tkachuk, Jesper Bratt, Cam Talbot, Brock Besser, JT Miller, and Frank Vetrano. Interesting that Cam Talbot is there. He started off very hot this season. He's dropped off a bit. And the Los Angeles Kings actually this morning announcing that Todd McClellan has been let go as their head coach, which is pretty surprising to say the least. So those are the teams. I mentioned yesterday the skills competition going tonight, $1 million on the line for the winner. And hopefully Pasta can bring that home. I think he's one of the favorites for this award. And again, I think you're going to see him tonight showing why he should be a face of the NHL. He should be captaining one of these teams. Let's be honest. Bruins are one of the best teams in the NHL. He's one of the best players. I don't know why he hasn't been on the cover of NHL. I don't know why he's not a captain for one of these teams. I mean, who would you take out? Not McKinnon, not the Oilers, not Matthews and company, because they are hosting. I know why they went with the Hughes, but I would have put Team Pastrnak in there instead of Team Hughes, but that's just me. Anyways, I do have some notes about All-Star festivities, and we'll talk a little bit about how things used to be and what they can do to improve the event here coming up as the podcast continues. All right, the Super Bowl is coming up, and I don't know about you, but my favorite part of the Super Bowl is grabbing some snacks, sitting on the couch, and placing some super bets. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a dub, or two, or even three. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. Now, new customers can join today and get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Happy Super Bowl to all who are celebrating from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, Locked On has recently launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Locked On Sports Today has our local hosts covering every team, as well as national show hosts, all discussing the top sports stories of the day. Subscribe to Locked On Sports Today to get all the latest over on the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. No, I'm not a huge things used to be better kind of guy, but when it comes to the All-Star game, I kind of am. It feels like All-Star used to mean something. It used to mean something like when you're talking about who could be in the Hall of Fame one day. You're an X-time All-Star. Being a member of the All-Star team just seemed to have more resonance to it. Maybe in the 90s. I don't know when exactly it changed, but if you look at the format from 47 to 68, it was very cool. The previous season's Stanley Cup champions would take on a team of All-Stars from other clubs. That's not going to happen now because of, well, the game has changed so much. And back in the original 6 days, one team was made up of All-Stars because the player pool was limited. Beginning in 1969, it was more of a Wales Eastern Conference versus Campbell Western Conference format, with the first team, including the starting goalie, voted in by the fans. The remainder of the team's rosters were chosen by NHL hockey operations departments and teams' general managers. That seemed to have been kind of the heyday of the All-Star game. That kind of changed in the late 90s. But between 1970 to the late 90s, it wasn't, get a representative from every team. It wasn't fans voting in the majority of the players. It was, hockey operations would sit down and say, who are the best players in the NHL? Who do we want to be representing the league on this stage? All stars. We don't want representatives from the worst team in the NHL if they don't have a star. I don't even know who's here from San Jose and Anaheim. I think we have Frank Vatrano there from the Ducks. All due respect, he doesn't scream all-star to me in my mind. Now, in 1998, they switched to the North American versus the world. That lasted through 2002, right in between those two Olympic Games. Then they went back to the East versus West format. Since around 2015, they went to the 3-on-3 tournament format. Everybody gets an invite, participation ribbons for every team, and it just has lacked that luster. I think a great idea would be kind of going back to the original format. Maybe not the Stanley Cup champions taking part, but I would love to see all-stars from the NHL, like the best NHL players, taking on all-stars from the KHL. I think that would be pretty cool. Or at least just go back to East, West, the best players. I know there have been some instances where guys would rather sit out. They'd rather go on vacation. They take the 1-game suspension. I don't think that was the case this year as much, but I think they took a step in the right direction by bringing the draft back, although it kind of fell flat. Too many people talking, too big of a stage. Literally, it was on the ice at Scotiabank Arena. Not enough beverages, perhaps. Maybe it was a bit too early in the night. But that's one way, I think, a couple ways that I would improve the All-Star event. Make it the true stars of the game. And perhaps mix it up by bringing in some players from other international leagues like the KHL. if you look at the scoring race at the moment, not all the best players are here. Artemi Panarin, maybe he's there. But there are some guys who aren't here that should be here. Just take like the top, 40 scorers in the NHL and just bring them. I don't care what team they play for. Just let them come, invite them, choose them, and have the actual All-Star game mean something. I think the All-Star game peaked for me when the Bruins hosted it in the 90s, 1996 to be exact. The lockout the previous season annulled this game, so it was rescheduled for January 20th, 1996, Fleet Center in Boston. It was just a fantastic event in which our boy Ray Bourque was named MVP, scored with just 37.3 seconds remaining in regulation to lift the Eastern Conference to a 5-4 victory, and he was named All-Star MVP. I always loved watching Ray Bourque in the accuracy competition. I always loved watching Chara take part in the hardest slap shot competition. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing David Pastrnak light it up tonight in the skills competition in Toronto. I believe it starts at 7 p.m. We're talking about some international competitions coming back, and we'll discuss how it's failing our boy David Pastrnak here as the podcast continues. The NHL is scheduled to have its annual All-Star media availability this afternoon, and it's being reported that this will include a couple international events. The NHL is going to participate in the 2026 Winter Olympics, as well as the 2030 Winter Olympics, which means the return of best on best play, which is very, very exciting. It's been way too long. Since like Sochi? Did they have them in 2018? I can't remember. But it's been way, way too long since hockey was in the Winter Olympics, and will be coming back in 2024 and 2030. Those will be played in where are the Winter Olympics going to be in 2024 in 2026. They will be in Italy, and then in 2030, yet to be announced where the 2030 Winter Olympics are going to be. But the next ones will be in Italy. So not a super convenient time zone, but not like it is in China, where it's in the middle of the night per se, or Nagano when it came back in 1998. So very exciting for NHL participation at the Olympics. It has been way too long, and we will, of course, see David Pastrnak in action there. We will see Jeremy Swayman, I'm sure. Outside chance, Brad Marchand could be on Team Canada in 2026. And, best on best, America, Canada will be amazing. Again, last World Cup of Hockey was held in 2016. NHL players have not participated in the Olympics in a decade, since the 2014 or 2014 games in Sochi. Now, in preparation for that, or maybe to generate some excitement, it's also believed that there will be a Four Nations Cup that will be replacing next year's NHL All-Star Game. USA, Canada, Sweden, and Finland. These four countries will take part in a tournament to be played in Boston and Montreal, which is absolutely ridiculous because it means that David Pastrnak won't get a chance to represent Czechia in the NHL city in which he plays. Even Yaroslakovsky in Montreal, Slovakia, he won't be able to play in Montreal. It makes no sense. Why not make it at least 6 teams with adding those 2 traditional, international, I don't want to say powerhouses, but teams? Obviously, they're not going to have Russia because of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. So it's not a true best on best if you're not going to have like Nikita Kucherov playing either. So it's kind of just a filler tournament. Why not bring in Team Europe again, like they had Team North America at the other World Cup? There are creative ways you can do it. Have some fun with it. It's a fairly meaningless tournament, and the fact that David Pastrnak won't be there playing for any team when the tournament's being partly hosted in Boston, it doesn't make any sense. Some other news breaking this morning. The Montreal Canadiens have traded Sean Monahan to the Winnipeg Jets. He was a guy that perhaps Bruins had their eyes on as a veteran who could add some center depth. Kent Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens ending up getting 2 first-round picks. They got one from Calgary to take Monahan on, and now they traded him to Winnipeg for a first-round pick. Incredible asset management there by the Montreal Canadiens. And again, the Bruins don't have a first-round pick this year. So between this deal with the Jets and then the Vancouver Canucks picking up Elias Lindholm, I mean, I'm fine letting the Western Conference teams have this arms race, have things a bit quieter in the East where it's fairly wide open. Bruins have as good of a chance as any team at the moment. And which reminds me, New York Rangers, Vincent Trocheck is their representative. Like, what are we doing here? Oliver Bjorkstrand. No one's going to look at his a hockey reference and be like, ooh, he was a one-time All-Star. Put him in the Hall of Fame. This goes back to the every team needs a representative. Sometimes teams are just good, but they don't have an All-Star caliber player. That's fine. That's totally fine. It doesn't matter. I mean, maybe have someone from every team representing in the skills competition, but it doesn't have to be in the actual All-Star event. That should mean something, and it really doesn't anymore. It's a pretty meaningless thing. It's for the kids. It's to get together. There is some news being made here. It's a networking event. I had hoped to go down, but alas, not happening. And I'll be watching from the comfort of home, just like everybody else. We'll be back on Monday to recap whatever happens this weekend. And if Pasta wins MVP, whatever, I'll jump on and record a quick short on YouTube. So please be sure to subscribe over there. Please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app if you are not already. And yeah, I'm excited for the second half of, the unofficial second half of the NHL season and seeing what our Bruins are able to do. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've all had a great week. Hope you're all excited for the weekend. Please do take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you again here on Monday's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.